Good evening, everyone. We will call to order the Oxnard City Council Community Services Public Safety, Housing and Development Committee meeting for September 27th, 2022, which starts at 6:45 hours. And Madam Clerk, if we can have the roll call and posting of the agenda, please.
Member Zaragoza,
Here.
Member Madrigal,
Here.
Chair McDonald.
Here.
The agenda for this meeting was posted on the City Hall Bulletin Board on September 20th, 2022.
And if you'd all stand and join in saluting the flag of our nation. Place your hand on your flag by saying, I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible. Thank you all. That will take us to item B, public comments on items not on the agenda. We did not have any pre-recorded requests to speak or comments, but Madam Clerk, do we have anybody that's called in to speak on this?
We do not have any raised hands at the moment, and we do not have any public speakers in person. Thank you.
Thank you, Madam Clerk. Takes us to the consent agenda. Item 1 is City Clerk Department approval of the minutes. And the recommendation is that the Community Services, Public Safety, Housing and Development Committee approve the minutes of the July 26, 2022 regular meeting as presented. And I'll ask again, Madam Clerk, do we have any speakers on this item?
We do not have any speakers virtually, and we do not have any public speakers in person. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you very much. Hopefully the members have had an opportunity to read the minutes from the last meeting or the minutes from the meeting posted. What's the pleasure of the committee?
Move to approve. Second.
Madam Clerk, we have a motion and a second. A roll call, please.
Member Madrigal,
Aye.
Member Zaragoza,
Aye.
Chair McDonald.
Aye.
Thank you. Motion passes 3-0.
Thank you very much. That takes us to item D1, Police Department. And the subject is Southern California Technology Task Force Service Agreement. The recommendation is that the Community Services, Public Safety, Housing and Development Committee approve and recommend the City Council approve and authorize the mayor to execute a 2-year service agreement. That agreement is number A as in Adam 8490 with the County of Ventura and the Ventura County Sheriff's Office for services with the Southern California High Technology Task Force, also known as SCHTTF, in an amount not to exceed $250,000. And Madam Clerk, do we have anybody that's called in to speak on this?
We do not have any public speakers at this time. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you. And pursuant to Measure M, there was a pre-recorded presentation on the city's YouTube channel. Chief Benitez is here to answer any questions or provide additional information if the committee members have any questions or comments. Committee Member Madrigal?
No additional comment.
Mayor?
Yeah, so Chief, this is a 2-year contract, is my understanding, and apparently we are one of 10 cities that utilizes the service.
Yes, Mayor, that is correct. It is a 2-year contract, and we are one of 10 cities that are participating in this venture. So that's what keeps the cost down. The more cities that participate.
And this is for forensic examinations and to help us with numerous crimes and et cetera.
Yes, they do a garden variety of different forensic evaluations for technological items, whether it's computers, laptops, phones, those types of things that have actually become very critical in us actually not just proving the case, but getting a case filing. It's almost becoming part of the process now is to have a technology evaluation of anything that's related to that in an investigation.
So, Mr. Chair, this helps us out with the expenses, instead of us doing it ourselves and have to hire our own forensic experts,
Yes, we have limited capacity to do some things ourselves, but when you look at the depth of the capabilities that the high tech task force have, that goes far beyond what we can do. If we were to send each case out to, say, a third party, like a professional service to do that, we would far exceed the amount that we have set aside for this particular agreement.
Thank you, sir.
We're good.
Yep.
Thank you, Chief. I don't have any additional questions or comments, so I would move the recommended action.
Second.
And Madam Clerk, we have a motion and a second by Member Madrigal. Roll call, please.
Member Zaragoza,
Yes.
Chair McDonald,
Yes.
Member Madrigal,
Aye.
motion carries 3-0.
Thank you very much, Chief.
Thank you.
We'll just call this the Jason Benitez show for a while here. Next one is item D2, unmanned aerial systems, also commonly referred to as drones, ordinance. Recommendation is that the Community Services, Public Safety, Housing and Development Committee recommend that the City Council introduce and adopt an ordinance adding Article 25. Hopefully I got that right, to Chapter 7 of the Oxnard City Code to regulate the use of unmanned aerial systems, drones, within the city of Oxnard. There was a pre-recorded Measure M presentation on the city's YouTube channel. And Madam Clerk, do we have anybody that is requested to speak on this item?
We do not have any public speakers in person, and we do not have any public speakers virtually. No public comment at this time. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you very much. And Chief Benitez is here to answer any questions or provide additional information should the committee desire. And I guess I'll start out on this one. 30 years ago or longer, when I got into law enforcement, I never, ever imagined that we would see something like this. And, now we're talking about autonomous driving vehicles that will drive themselves. My wife doesn't even like it when I drive. There's no way she can let the car drive, but we're seeing all this technology that's just drastically changing our lives. And, who would have thought that you have to protect a crime scene, not only from people messing up your evidence, but also from people around the area flying their own unmanned aerial system in to see what's going on and potentially interfering with investigations. So I read through the ordinances. I think they're common sense and straightforward. I think it's a great idea. Mayor, any comments?
Yes, I one of the concerns I had, I've heard this before over at the county, is the concerns we had of people concerned about the drones flying over windows and behind homes and apparently overcrowded people or events and so forth. I was reading here where we also have the same regs. Chief, can you expound a little bit more on those items?
Certainly.
Mhm.
With drones becoming more and more prevalent across the country, I think I said that there were like over 800, or I'm sorry, in Commander Marquez's report, he wrote that over 800,000 drones are registered in this country. There's a large portion of people that have not registered their drones and do not comply with some of the rules that are prescribed by the Federal Aviation Administration. And there are some basic rules that they lay out. Some of the fundamentals include not flying over crowds, includes not flying over 400 feet above the deck. It includes not flying at night. It includes not leaving your visual line of sight. So some people will send their drones to places where they can no longer see them. So those are some safety concerns, crowds being one of them. We've had that happen actually at some events over the past couple of years where we've had to take action, but we really didn't have any teeth about dealing with it at the local level. So we took these and codified some ordinances that when we do come across situations like that, we do have some means to regulate that or enforce those types of things that are safety violations or privacy violations. So it's something that, some cities were very early adopters of drone ordinances. We're kind of on the early side of that as well, but I think we're trying to get in front of this because we are seeing a lot more of these drones flying at night. They're not supposed to fly at night. You need permission from the FAA to do that. So if we're able to locate the operator, we can actually take enforcement action to cite them.
One of the things too that the key points that you have here is that no person shall operate a drone with influence on alcohol, cannabis, or any other drugs or intoxicating substances. And I understand also, I think you had a statement here where in the 4th of July, we had a drone. It was almost hit another drone or something like, or firework. I can't remember what it was. Can you share a little bit about that too?
Certainly. And this isn't the only example, but it just happens to be one that we happen to catch on video is during the 4th of July, we have a large scale deployment and we put drones out to help with the fireworks enforcement. So during the course of that afternoon/evening, we had our drone above a neighborhood. And if you look at the presentation, we actually show a video clip of
That's right.
this is a hobbyist flying their drone within a few yards of our piece of equipment. And so when that happens, that the risk of a collision exists. It's very unsafe because these are both considered to be aircraft. And these are overpopulated areas. So that was a good example, I think. But we also have come across other types of behaviors as well that are not safe. And so that was a good way to highlight the need for some kind of regulation.
And like the chair mentioned, boy, this is really high technology. This is really great, that really helps our people and also assist our officers. For example, if there's an area that's really not conducive for them to go in, that drone can help tremendously.
It has been a game changer, Mayor, and I'll credit Commander Rocky Marquez for his work on this. He's been taking the lead of being the program manager for our drone unit. We've been operating drones for almost 3 years now, and surprisingly, we have used them in a number of cases where it has made a big difference in monitoring the safety of an officer, where we can see a dangerous suspect fleeing from a house. We don't have to chase, we just watch where he goes, and we're able to more likely spot that person. Yard searches, tactical deployments, but special events. It's been a game changer, and it's my hopes that in the near future we can actually take it to the next level with some type of first responder program with drones.
Fantastic. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you. Member Madrigal, any comments or questions?
Thank you. Real quickly, piggybacking off of previous comments, I think this is going to be great. One thing I do have kind of concern over is just your regular hobbyist use of it. Obviously, I understand, people misusing this, and of course, they should pay for the consequences. For example, even going to the Cowboys event, I know that there was multiple drones in the air, and I know that not all those drones belong to the city of Oxnard. Some of those actually belong to some of the people visiting there. What's going to happen in those type of situations, or even when we, like for example, family reunions or organizational events where people take out a drone to take a organizational picture or a big family picture in those instances, because technically by letter of the law, they would be violating the law since there will be others nearby.
So just like any other infraction or offense it's codified in our laws, the officers do have they have a tremendous amount of discretion as how they want to apply that. And so the situation that you outlined was something which I think discretion would play a factor in. I think what we are focusing on are the irresponsible or the dangerous behaviors, flying while intoxicated, flying over crowds like, a training camp or something like that, or a stadium, a high school game, flying at night. These things they are fundamentally told when people purchase drones, these are the rules. The rules that I laid out a minute ago are fundamental by the Federal Aviation Administration. Don't fly at night. Fly only where you can see your drone. Don't fly over 400 feet. So we have to take them seriously, and we have to evaluate like what each particular infraction of that ordinance looks like. I can see a big difference between, a variety of situations, but when I think the default is common sense, when somebody is simply acting irresponsible or dangerous is when we would apply the ordinance.
Okay, sounds good. Thank you.
Okay, thank you very much. What will be the pleasure of the committee?
Motion to approve.
Second.
Madam Clerk, we have a motion and a second. Roll call, please.
May I please confirm that we have a motion by Member Zaragoza and a
Yes.
second by Member Madrigal?
Correct.
Thank you.
And thank you, Chief.
Thank you.
Chair McDonald,
Yes.
Member Madrigal,
Yes.
Member Zaragoza.
Yes.
Thank you. Motion carries 3-0.
Thank you
Thank
very
you.
much, Chief.
Thank you.
Takes us to item 3, Community Development Department. The subject is an M6 contract amendment. Recommendation is that the Community Services, Public Safety, Housing and Development Committee recommend that City Council approve and authorize the mayor to execute a First Amendment to agreement number A as in Adam 8418 with M6 Consulting Incorporated for on-call development plan check services, increasing the agreement amount by $1,500,000 for a total agreement amount of $2 million. And pursuant to Measure M, there was a pre-recorded presentation on the city's YouTube channel. And Madam Clerk, do we have any requests to speak on this item?
We do not have any speakers virtually, and we do not have any speakers in person. No public speakers at this time. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Madam Clerk. And Mr. Jeff Pengilly is here to answer any questions or provide any additional information if the committee's request. Mayor, any comments?
Yes, Jeff, I think this is really important. I know we're increasing by $1.5 million. But I think the important thing is that we have had in the past, where we had a lot of backlog, a lot of projects, the timelines were not met, permits and so forth, customer service. And I think this is going to help us reduce a lot of those barriers that you mentioned here on your report. And also hopefully it can help us with expansion of businesses and retention of attraction of support for you folks that I think you need tremendously. So I think this is going to help us with the backlog, that are really, really important because I get a lot of calls from, hey, my permit is, I submitted a permit X time ago and we're still waiting for it and I have people waiting and so forth. But I know it's a lot of money, but it's something that we need to take care of. And eventually that backlog is going to bring us money also, which I think is really important. So I think that eventually one of the things that you mentioned too, once we catch up, then we'll have additional staff to help us maintain, the timelines that are really important to the businesses and to also the private individuals that are building additions and so forth. So I think it's a good deal.
Excellent. Member Madrigal, any comments or questions?
I just pretty much everything the mayor said, I'll end up going to dinner with people who literally live waiting in line across the street. And they usually never talk to me about this simply because how upset they know that they'll get when we have that conversation. I know that, a lot of these contractors go from city to city and, they compare and contrast. And usually, they have, quite frankly, nothing but negative things to say about the city of Oxnard. And even people who live here in the city of Oxnard, sometimes they will say things nicely to people around them and then they come talk to me and tell me, I know they're trying their best and I know it's hard, but they tell me A, B, C, D, E, F, and G, the things that they would change within the department or, little complaints here and there. So I know it's a process and hopefully, more so even than money, I think the customer service aspect of this is the driving force behind this. So this is a no-brainer.
Very good.
Thank you very much. I will just concur with all the comments that have been said. And usually the biggest complaint we hear as an elected is it takes forever to get plan checks done. So this is a step in the right direction. And that's not a detriment against our staff. We've been trying our very best to catch up. It just takes a long time to catch up. Doesn't happen overnight. So I will support the recommended action. That would be my motion.
Second.
And second by Member Madrigal. Roll call, please, Madam Clerk.
Chair McDonald,
Yes.
Member Madrigal,
Aye.
Member Zaragoza.
I'm
Motion carries 3-0. Thank you.
And
Thank you.
actually, and Jeff, this is the right direction. I think we're going, this is really important to all of us. I don't want to be calling Jeff, maybe for coffee, but
Thank you very much.
thank you.
Thank you very much. That takes us to item number 4, Community Development Department. The subject is climate action adaptation plan and an addendum to the 2030 general plan program environmental impact report, also known as a PEIR, schedule number 200-704-1024. And the recommendation is that the Community Services, Public Safety, Housing and Development Committee, one, receive a presentation on the city's draft climate action and adaptation plan, also known as CAAP. Two, receive public comments on the draft CAAP document. Three, provide recommendations on Planning Commission and staff's recommended edits. And four, provide feedback on draft CAAP documents. And Madam Clerk, do we have any requests to speak on this?
We do not have any public speakers in person. However, we do have one public speaker virtually. One moment, please.
Chair McDonald, would it be possible to make some introductory remarks to introduce the team?
Sure.
Thank-
We did that before the speaker or after the speaker?
What I was going to recommend, the presentation is being live, so it might be
Okay.
more beneficial to have the public speaker after the presentation because they weren't able to view it ahead of time. The consultant will be
Okay.
presenting.
Madam Clerk, if we can ask the speaker just to bear with us while we do introductory remarks from Ms. Mallory and the presentation, and then we'll have them chime in first if that's acceptable.
Next speaker with phone number ending in 0218. We will put you back on hold and we will unmute you after the presentation. Thank you.
Okay, Ms. Mallory, you want to do some introductory remarks?
Thank you. And I'll, in the meantime, I'll give a minute here for Jeff Caden to be able to share his screen. And we'll speak to the slides here this evening. So good evening, Chair McDonald and Mayor Zaragoza and Councilmember Madrigal. This is an exciting evening in our arena and for the city and for our community. This is the culmination of a 2.5-year project. First, I wanted to introduce the team. We have Jeff Caden. Here we go. There we go. Who is the Managing Director of Environmental Sciences Associates. We have Shannon Wages, the Principal Planner with ESA, and also a lead author with the document before you this evening. And then we have Brian Schuster, Senior Managing Associate with ESA, who's been instrumental in bringing the CAP document before you. We also have representatives from Public Works here on the Zoom as well as in the audience. And I just wanted to do a shout out to the Public Works team for really coming alongside us and helping to create a document that really is reflective of our community and what our municipal infrastructure needs. I also wanted to thank Jeff Pengelly, and he's here as well, the building official, to answer any questions should they come up. So I think you've got a good team here to answer questions should they arise. So the document this evening reflects input from the city's Stakeholder Committee. If you want to go to the next slide. Thank you. This document before you really does reflect input over the past 2.5 years from our stakeholder groups as well, which represented a variety of interests, business, environmental, development community. It also, we provided a number of opportunities for both English and Spanish participation. We had a number of community meetings virtually. We had to flex, which was a big issue due to COVID in terms of how to engage the community and how to get robust input. We also had a survey that was provided to provide opportunities in English and Spanish regarding the best ways to reduce GHG. The meetings that we had really helped identify climate change impacts that were of the most concerns to the community and the best ways to reduce greenhouse gas emissions in our community as well. So what the purpose of this evening, and then after the slide, I'll turn it over to Jeff Caden. The purpose this evening is to review the draft CAP before you. We're going to call it CAP, but it really addresses greenhouse gas emissions and ways to get to the council and committee adopted reduction targets. And our consultant will go over that. It also lays out ways to deal with adaptation and resilience along the coastal areas, and we'll speak about that as well. Again, also the second action is to receive input on the CAP this evening. And then for the committee to provide recommendations on Planning Commission and staff recommended edits, of which there are 3, which we'll highlight in the presentation, and then for the committee to provide feedback on this draft cap document. With that, I'll turn over the presentation to Jeff Caden.
Great, thanks, Kathleen. So the draft cap is really implementing two goals from the sustainable communities element of the city's 2030 general plan, and one of those is to develop the cap. Another is an aspect of this cap is it really in general helps implement the general plan sustainability goals. And it has two primary objectives. One is to implement the council approved target to reduce greenhouse gas emissions to 40% below 1990 levels by 2030, which is consistent with state law as is expressed in Senate Bill 32. The other primary objective is to enhance the community's resilience to a changing climate by addressing climate-related vulnerabilities and risks. And the cap includes strategies and actions to achieve the council-approved greenhouse gas reduction target. Here you see just an organizational chart of the cap. It's organized into 5 chapters and 6 appendices. And one key component is identifying where the greenhouse gases are coming from throughout the city. The cap provides comprehensive inventories of greenhouse gas emissions for both the community at large and for the municipal operations. On the left, the pie chart for the community greenhouse gases shows that transportation is the largest source, followed by electricity use and natural gas use in buildings, and then solid waste. And together, those sources make up about 95% of total emissions. And on the right side of the screen, you see a breakdown of municipal operation emissions, and overall, they make up just 3% of the community. The cap includes 14 greenhouse gas reduction strategies under 7 categories, and those are clean energy, green buildings, transportation, land use, water conservation and reuse, waste reduction and recycling, and nature-based solutions like planting trees. For each strategy, there are multiple implementing actions and several, in fact, there's 85 supporting actions across these 14 different strategies. In developing these strategies and actions, we incorporated input from the public and the city council and the planning commission and the committee as referenced by Kathleen earlier. And now several of the key strategies build on what the city is already doing, existing programs and documents and work efforts, like joining the Clean Power Alliance in 2018, CPA, like adopting the 2013 Energy Action Plan. The city's also been working on a sustainable transportation plan and doing various initiatives along the lines to reduce waste reduction, along the lines of waste reduction and water conservation. The implementation of other GHG strategies in the cap will require investment of staff and resources. The cap also assesses the city's vulnerability to climate change and provides resilience and adaptation strategies addressing 5 major climate change hazards. Those are extreme heat, extreme drought, smoke and air pollution, sea level rise, and extreme storms and stormwater flooding. The cap does incorporate the city's existing sea level rise vulnerability assessment and the work it's been doing for its local coastal program. So there's no conflict between those two planning efforts. They are synchronized. And for other hazards, it includes strategies to protect critical facilities and infrastructure. For example, there's a strategy to create a flood impacts monitoring program. It includes strategies for protecting public health, for example, mitigating urban heat islands through green infrastructure, and for strategies for increasing, in general, community resilience to climate change. So another example there is to establish early warning systems for things like extreme heat events. Overall, there's 24 strategies addressing these hazards and 5 additional strategies related to community preparedness. The draft cap provides an implementation framework that identifies the lead department for implementation, the potential partners who can partner with the city on implementation, known funding sources, and the fiscal impact. The time frame that you see in the draft cap for implementing the greenhouse gas reduction strategies is provided in the table below. Initially, it was provided as three sets of timeframes: one near term, 2022 to 2025, and then a midterm and a long-term timeframe. But as the city's CIP was adopted in May 2022, we are now synchronizing with a 2-year CIP program, and which started the next cycle is 2022 to 2024. So we're recommending that the timeframes shift slightly, just by a year, for the near-term timeframe, going from 2022 to 2026, the midterm being pushed out to 2026 and 2030, and then long-term would be implementation after 2030. This would not affect the implementation timeframe for resilience and adaptation strategies, as they are more long-term, and the CIP cycle is not affecting those. So the strategies and the actions in the CAP that are key to the city achieving its 2030 reduction target are highlighted in the staff report and in the following slides. And it's important to note that some of these strategies are already being implemented by the city in compliance with state laws. For example, SB 13A3 for recycling and waste diversion, and for other reasons, and that these ongoing initiatives are incorporated into the CAP as part of the overall plan to achieving the city's reduction goals. So those marked with an X are important in that they are providing the greenhouse gas reductions that are needed for the city to reach your 2030 target. And you can see here under the category of clean energy, that's strategy E1, which is called Procure Zero Carbon Electricity, has an X marked next to it. And that's one of these key strategies that's quantified by the CAP. And in fact, E1 contributes to the largest greenhouse gas reduction in the CAP. And the key implementing action in that far column on the right is actually something the city is already doing. You have already joined CPA. So what this key action is saying is the city needs to maintain its partnership or its participation in CPA, and needs to retain that 95% community participation in their 100% green option. That's a really important strategy for the city to meeting its 2030 target. The other two strategies not marked by an X here, which are increase local solar energy generation and develop energy storage and microgrids, these are important to the city's long-term goal to achieve your 2045 target of carbon neutrality, but they're not critical to reaching that 2030 target. So they're not quantified, not shown as quantified in the CAP. Likewise, under the green buildings category, strategy B1 is important in terms of greenhouse gas reduction, and that key implementing action for B1 is to partner with existing agencies like CPA and like the renewable energy networks, 3C REN and SoCal REN. You already have relationships with these agencies, so it's merely saying you should be strengthening those relationships along the lines of finding new opportunities for improving efficiency of existing buildings. That could be local programs if they're being run through those agencies. It could be meeting with them on a regular basis to identify funding sources, et cetera. Under transportation, there are several strategies that are quantified and contribute to the greenhouse gas reduction target, but T1, expanding the zero emission vehicle infrastructure, really has the most impact in terms of reducing emissions. And that reflects the importance of providing a supporting local infrastructure for the community to adopt electric vehicles. We know lots of funding is coming down the pipe. The state now has policies in place where there are going to be timelines where we have to stop selling fossil fuel vehicles and everything has to be electric as of 2035. That's one of the big governor's executive orders and a law that was just passed by the legislature. So this is a really important one. And then these other two underneath, they have lower levels of greenhouse gas reduction, but they're also important. You can see the transition city fleet to zero emission vehicles. Both the T1 and T2 have a key action of developing a ZEB master plan. So that's going to evaluate the long-term and near-term needs for EV charging and hydrogen fueling infrastructure, identify optimal charging locations, identify funding sources, those kinds of things. Also meeting with utilities and state agencies to track and coordinate grant offerings and funding offerings. And then on expanding infrastructure for pedestrians, bikes, and micromobility solutions, that's strategy T3, also quantified in the CAP. That's where one of the key actions is really to adopt the forthcoming STP, that's the Sustainable Transportation Plan, which does include expanding the pedestrian and bicycle network throughout the city. There are some additional transportation strategies, and one more that's quantified in the CAP is expand car and bike sharing. So some of the key things there is, again, the implementation of the STP, the Sustainable Transportation Plan, and also to consider updates to the TDM ordinance to encourage development of TDM plans for major developments. For the remaining sectors covered in the CAP, waste reduction and recycling, this really reflects the key actions there, really reflect things that city is already doing. Waste turns out to be an important strategy for achieving the target. By merely achieving the state's mandated target of 75% diversion of organics, you'll be reducing emissions quite a bit by 2025 through 2030. Water conservation and reuse. The water is not as impactful in terms of, or water conservation is not as impactful in reducing emissions, but it still has important co-benefits to resilience, just to general water supply and those types of things. So the CAP builds on actions that the city is already taking, including the advanced water purification facility and the increased availability of recycled water. The land use category really is to continue to focus on, the key action is to continue to focus on reducing VMT through land use planning that creates less reliance on the automobile, and it's through the forthcoming general plan update, you'll be identifying areas within the city that you can do that. So as mentioned earlier, we have received input from the Planning Commission. We had a study session back in July 7th, where the commission provided comments on the CAP. We reviewed the public input that we'd received. We discussed several revisions. There was concurrence on many of those revisions. And then we identified 7 topic areas for further discussion and exploration. There was another meeting on September 1st where we went through those 7 items and we paired them back to 3. And the 3 I'm going to go through here involve suggested additions or changes to the CAP language. The first is that there were several comments by the public and some by the commission that the city should go farther than the target of reducing emissions 40% below 1990 levels. And realizing that if we did that, if we needed to get to a more aggressive target, we would probably have to really extend the schedule for the CAP. It would result in rewriting of the CAP, additional strategies, would delay adoption of the document. And so the Planning Commission agreed that this following language should be put into the CAP to state that the city has an aspirational goal to achieve carbon neutrality by 2045, and that we should revisit the feasibility of that goal during the next CAP update, which should occur no more than 5 years from adoption, but also acknowledge that updating this target may be necessary before that due to the recent passage of Assembly Bill 2027 or 1227, which requires the state to achieve carbon neutrality by 2045. And that law was just passed just about a week or 2 ago. The second item considered at the September 1st meeting was, should the city consider requiring or encouraging project labor agreements as a way to reduce vehicle miles traveled? And it was acknowledged that VMT reduction is really largely driven by land use policy, transit policy or transit infrastructure, and bike and pedestrian opportunities, and that a reduction in commuter trips from PLAs would be relatively small and short-lived. So the recommendation is to revise the strategy L1 on page 330 to acknowledge the relationship between VMT and land use and transportation policy, and then also the relationship between VMT and transit and pedestrian improvement opportunities. So strengthen that discussion there The third recommendation relates to funding, and there was a thought or an idea that we should allocate $1 million annually in the city's fiscal year budget to implement the cap, to implement the near-term actions. And there was discussion. The Planning Commission arrived at this recommended language change, really avoiding a specific dollar figure, since the costs are not known at this time, and state and federal funding is increasing. And so the language that it is suggested is to the secure funding section on page 5.6. The city will consider the cap in yearly departmental budgeting and CIP activities and seek out federal and state funding opportunities where funding aligns with council priorities and cap programs. And with
Thank you,
that, you can hand it back to
Thank you. Thank you, Jeff. We're stepping over each other here. It's hard. Thank you for that overview. What we have before you is what we call the draft cap, because we recognize there are edits that need to be made to it. One is to bring forward a letter from the mayor and an introductory letter. We also had agreed upon, as a result of many public meetings on the draft, we received comments and minor typos or added language that was not substantial that was presented to the Planning Commission. That's in your packet as well. So we need to make edits, around 100 of them. They're small, but we want to reflect that. We also will be updating some city photos of that we feel are a little more representative of the city. So that's why we call it the draft before you. And then also to reflect the committee's input and input on the Planning Commission items that Mr. Caton went over. And in terms of just saving fiscal resources, we didn't want to incorporate the roughly 100 I mentioned of edits before bringing it here, just in the interest of being sustainable. Next slide, please. As Mr. Caton indicated, the CAP is a project which requires environmental analysis and determination in accordance with the in accordance with the California Environmental Quality Act. And as Mr. Caton indicated, the CAP, as we call it, is an implementing action of the 2030 general plan. We prepared an addendum to the 2030 program environmental impact report, and that's a part of your resolution as well. There will be no environmental impacts as a result of approval of this CAP document. Next slide, please. As Mr. Caton indicated, the implementation of the climate action adaptation plan will have a financial impact, and the funding sources that you'll see in Chapter 5 of the document identify typical funding sources, for example, general fund, enterprise funds, or grants. During the budget process that will be identified, what is the best funding source to implement the CAP document, with particular focus on near-term actions, as well as a question regarding the city's capital improvement plan. And if this is really a document before you to pick and choose what you'd like to move forward through the next funding cycle, through your next CIP, through your next department budget process. And the cost and details on the fiscal impacts of all the short, near-term, midterm, and long-term actions really are not known, because over time, budgets change, funding changes, as you're seeing with capital improvement projects. They're all over the board. So we did not do a funding analysis and a fiscal analysis of each and every one of the implementing actions recommended. And also that's because those items may change at the council level, and that would be a waste of resources, really. And as I mentioned, the CAP does include year one recommendations. One of the most important one is to develop a fiscal impact analysis of those near-term cost estimates, or those near-term projects, and get a cost estimate for that. And most importantly, we do keep our finger on the pulse and look for funding sources, grant funding, or opportunities to partner with some of our agencies and entities, like the Clean Power Alliance, or the 3C REN, or the Ventura County Regional Energy Alliance, which is a member of the 3C REN. So we really do look for opportunities to leverage and take advantage of grant money and to piggyback on existing contracts and fiscal resources through those contracts. Next slide, please. And with that, this evening, we are recommending that you receive public comments on the draft climate action adaptation plan document, provide recommendations on the 3 planning commission recommended edits and staff's written suggestions to that, and then to provide feedback on the draft CAP document. And this concludes our presentation.
Thank you, Ms. Mallory. Madam Clerk, if we can go to the public speaker now. If they're still here, hopefully.
Public speaker with phone number ending 0218. Would you please unmute by pressing *6? Good evening. Would you like to introduce yourself?
Yes, thank you. My name is Steve Nash, and good evening, Chair McDonald, committee members, and staff. This is a good plan, not a perfect plan, but as a member of the Planning Commission, I did vote for it with the expectation that in 5 years we can revisit some of the what I perceive to be deficiencies, and those are how do we move forward with decarbonizing buildings and a REACH code. And if you are interested, Edison actually has a full page about the benefits of induction cooking, and it's really quite something. So I think that we can ban natural gas hookups in new buildings, and that would be a major benefit. The other aspect is how do we find the funding to install 1,500 EV chargers within the city? That is a recommendation in the climate action plan, but there is unfortunately no funding mechanism. The other item I want to address is I listened to the One Water subcommittee of Metropolitan Water District today, where they approved a ban on potable water being used for irrigation of non-functional turf. And they actually provided a model ordinance language page. It was agenda item 7-11, I believe, attachment 2, page 1, where they offer definitions, and it's something I think the city should adopt because there is absolutely a nexus between climate change and water usage and water supply, certainly. So this is something that I recommended for a while. There's no reason for us to have non-functional turf here in the desert. And their ordinance would actually only involve commercial, industrial, and institutional or public properties and facilities. So I think it's something to look forward to, and I hope that you vote to approve the climate action and adaptation plan. Thank you, and good evening.
Thank you, Mr. Nash. Madam Clerk, do we have any other requests to speak?
We do not have any additional virtual speakers, or we also do not have any speakers here in person. Thank you, Chair.
Okay, thank you. I'll open it up to the committee for comments, Mayor.
Yeah, I just want to thank Mallory and Ms. Mallory and the consultant. That's a tremendous amount of information, that was given to us here in just a few minutes. Of course, we've been talking about it for a while, but I think I want to thank the Planning Commission for, I'm sure that they really looked at this pretty thoroughly, which I think is really important. And you had some public feedback too that I think helped us out tremendously. Climate change, as you know, is really hurting us throughout the world, as we can see even back east right now and so forth. But I think that we're heading in the right direction. And you said this is part of the general plan. We have to adapt, change the general plan. Is that what's add that to it? Can you share a little bit more about that?
Yes, Mayor Zaragoza and committee. After we get this document approved, then the next step is to update the 2030 general plan. So 2050 Oxnard, it's coming forward. And that we envision that as a 3 to 4 year work effort, including really looking at land uses. We've already been in the trenches and looking at the VMT issues. So we see this an update to the general plan, taking that time frame, and then our cap, as you're hearing, 44% of the emissions come from transportation. That we'll be very mindful of that as we move forward with our plan. So that'll take around 3 to 4 years to complete, then hopefully about a year to get our cap through, and then we'll bring that forward before you in about 5 years, an update to the cap.
And of course, one of the biggest concerns was to have enough UV stations to accommodate, to help us reduce that.
Yeah, that is definitely correct. Electric vehicle charging, as Mr. Nash, Commissioner Nash is indicating, our cap. That seems like a lot, 1,500, but we are keeping our finger on the pulse with federal and state funding opportunities. And so it is the recommendation for that. And that is actually one of our near-term recommendations, is in addition to coming up with a fiscal impact analysis of near-term projects, also funding a EV master plan. We're aware of the EV master plans that have been done for Ventura County and Oxnard. We think there should be some changes to that, and one of the near-term actions is adopting an EV master plan.
You said something important about funding. We're looking at enterprise funds, general fund grants, and so forth. And that's going to take a tremendous amount of funding, quite a bit of funding. Now, each program, then I think one of the suggestions was, and I'm not sure if we're going to do that or not, to put $1 million aside every year. Would that be a percentage per department, per people that are affecting the whole climate change process?
Mayor, this is certainly within the prerogative of council or the committee to make
Yeah.
a recommendation on that. We wouldn't, at a staff level, we wouldn't recommend a specific dollar amount.
Right.
There's a few reasons outlined in the report, which I'm happy to cover. One is that we're seeing a tremendous amount of federal and state money coming forward for energy efficiencies, and everyone is finally realizing the connections between land use, water, housing, climate, and sustainable action. So really putting that dollar amount when there may be a year that no more is needed.
I was only using that number because they use that could be less than that, could be more, we don't know yet until staff actually looks at the data and recommends to the city council.
Absolutely. And we would recommend under recommendation 3 to Planning Commission action. And the commission was fine with that language, which is to just make reference to consider the cap in the CAP and the department budgeting process.
So one of the things I know they mentioned, I'm taking a lot of time here, but the thing that was mentioned initially, that we had some feedback or the information went out in Spanish and English. What I think we're at 95% is what we're looking at right now. How do we convey all this good information to the public in Spanish and English?
Excuse me, Mayor, you're saying participation?
Yes, participation.
We're at 96%, 100% renewable,
Yeah, I
right?
do 90.
CPA. Yes. So we do work with the CPA and receive English and Spanish notifications regarding efficiency opportunities. So we promote that, we partner. And so through our social media efforts, we've been doing that. We've also reached out to school districts as well to share the information with their clients or their students and parents.
My last question I think I heard was that municipalities contribute 3%.
Yes.
So if we do what we're planning on doing, going to zero elimination, going into UV equipment and so forth, that's going to be expensive, number one, but it'll help us reduce our portion of that 3%, maybe to 2 or some other number,
And we'll also be demonstrating leadership, which is an important
Being the
aspect,
leaders.
certainly.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you. Member Madrigal, any comments?
Thank you for the presentation. I know, as was stated, this is gonna take the whole, this is gonna take the entire city, but at the same time, we are gonna need help from the state. So I know it's gonna be an ever-changing document along the way. Things obviously change very quickly. Over the last probably 5 summers, it's been very, very humid here in Oxnard. So I know it actually feels hotter here than in other places in some of the nearby cities. So overall, with ever so changing aspects to this, and I think the big one is transportation, but even that dynamic is changing a little bit. But something that I hope we could possibly do, I know it's not really at the staff level, but we kind of need to improve on our transportation. And that's more of a Southern California thing as opposed to an Oxnard thing, because public transportation is very inefficient when you compare it to other aspects around the country. So other than that, I'm good. Thank you.
Thank you. I think everybody will agree that we are experiencing climate change, and this is something that's happened over centuries. You can go back through the historical data and see that. Where we tend to not agree is what causes that climate change, and how do we deal with it? And that seems to be a moving target. And I've heard all kinds of explanations of what causes greenhouse gas emissions, all the way from discharges from cattle, in the terms of a gaseous, obnoxious substance that affects greenhouse gas, cars, so on and so forth. And I know on the Gold Coast Transit side, wearing that hat, we've been talking about changing our fleet. And right now our entire fleet is CNG, compressed natural gas. And we're transitioning over to hydrogen fuel cell in the foreseeable future. And generally, when you talk about these types of vehicles, from what I've been able to see, there are, fully electric vehicles, hybrid electric vehicles, and then so those that run off of hydrogen fuel cells. And my wife and I have been having discussions about, maybe we should do our part and get a less polluting vehicle. And we actually have a plug-in hybrid electric vehicle, which works well. But I looked at the hydrogen fuel cell, and while there are some vehicles out there that operate off the hydrogen fuel cell, and it's a motor that generates electricity based on hydrogen, but there's no discharge to the environment in terms of fumes or anything else. The only hydrogen fueling station I could find was in Thousand Oaks. So that means if I were to buy a hydrogen-based vehicle, I'd have to drive to Thousand Oaks to get fuel. Well, that probably wipe out half a tank going up there and coming back. I don't know. We ended up going with the plug-in hybrid electric vehicle. And one of the selling points that the dealer made to us was, oh, you get 3 years of free charges for buying this vehicle. Well, the only charging station that the company had that was free were out in Camarillo at the outlet center, meaning we'd have to drive out to Camarillo, charge the vehicle up, then drive home, and probably waste most of the charge in that trip. So, but there are other charging stations around, we just end up paying for. And when you look at the fully electric vehicles, there are a ton of charging stations available, primarily Tesla charging stations. And you go up to the collection and there may be 40 or 50 Tesla charging locations up there. And almost always they're full or at 90% capacity in terms of vehicles being charging or being charged. My one concern about this is those are all based on what needs to be a very robust electrical grid to support all this charging activity. And if you remember during the last week or 10 days or so, we've had some extremely high temperatures. And Cal ISO and Edison were saying, the grid's going to overload. Be careful what you do. And the first thing they said was, don't charge your electric vehicles. Well, if you have a system that's fully dependent on a charge and the state says don't charge them, what do you do when your battery charge runs out? So that's kind of a catch-22. We need to make sure that we have a very robust system that will handle the increased demand. Recently, the state passed went through water cooling prohibition for power plants, which is fine. They said it was creating warm water where it shouldn't be, so on and so forth, and took several power stations, and scheduled them to go offline at the end of 2022. Well, all of a sudden now they're saying, well, maybe we shouldn't do it so quick. Maybe we'll wait till 2024 now, trying to keep these charging stations. And one of them, Mandalay, has already gone offline. NRG closed the plant down and it's not generating anymore. Ormond is still operational. And I think Ormond did request to stay operational till 2024. But those are things that we need to look at, the totality of the circumstances to make sure that we're not biting our nose off to spite our face, so to speak. In that if we go to a fully electric system, that's fine, but we need to have the infrastructure and the grid that's able to support it. I can remember moving down here in the early 70s, and we had a condominium in Camarillo, and it was a gold medallion house. And it was taunted by Edison as being the wave of the future. So everything in the house was electric. You couldn't, no gas. They didn't even have gas in the neighborhood, no natural gas. And it was a terribly inefficient system in terms of how it worked, how much it costs, and so on and so forth. So Edison finally, I think, dropped that gold medallion program because it just didn't work out well. So I think as we move into this, we need to make sure that we're covering all our bases and looking at the totality of the circumstances and not sending ourselves down a road where all of a sudden at the end, there's going to be a stop sign and a block wall, and we run into that block wall and are stymied by that. So, and I've learned more about this, and I'm by no means any expert on this. I've learned by need on how to do this, and I think I'm comfortable with the information, but I just want to make sure that we're fully planning how we approach this to make sure that in 10 or 15 years from now, we haven't painted ourselves into a corner that we can't get out of. So I agree with this. I never thought I would have a hybrid or plug-in vehicle. I have one now. But again, it's going to be an adventure to see how we move to the future on this. And there's no doubt, again, as I said, that there is climate change. Where the doubt is, or the disagreement is, what causes it? How do we fix it? And so it's important to get all the information we can, all the stakeholders here. And you will hear some people tell you that we're doing more damage to the earth by the mining of the lithium for the battery systems than we are by just driving fossil fuel vehicles. I don't know. I'm not an expert on that, but there's all kinds of arguments on both sides as to what's the best way to go. And there probably won't ever be 100% agreement. That's part of life. Our request was to receive the presentation, receive public comments, provide recommendations, planning commission's comments, and provide feedback. And I think we have done all four of those. Mayor, any additional comments?
Yeah, I wanted, Ms. Mallory, have we worked with APCD and asked them, to look for grants for the AV stations? I know that they're working on that, but I think the APCD, Ventura County APC, can help us tremendously in that effort.
Yes, Mayor and Mayor Pro Tem, Councilmember Madrigal. Thank you for that question. I had also just a quick comment on Mayor Pro Tem's input on the EV, but yes, we have been working very much with APCD, and their program was great. It was two specific types of funding that was for EV, and you had to basically have your master plan turnkey ready. As Tatiana and I know, we were living this dream because we wanted to take advantage of the money. You had to have your EV master plan turnkey, put it in, and the money was gone within about 3 to 4 minutes, a certain type of money. We stand ready with knowing we need to get that EV master plan in place, and then that's really going to be our ticket to jump in with funding sources. Excuse me. Yes.
Just one quick question. I just wanted to clarify what the Mayor Pro Tem mentioned. I think it was mentioned, if I heard correctly, that the majority of the pollution, if you want to call it, is transportation, 40-some%.
Yes.
And remember when we had the pandemic, the 2 years over in Los Angeles, you couldn't see LA before the pandemic. And after that, it was clear as anything. So because the reduction in transportation was reduced tremendously. So I think really, and I hate to say it, when we have millions and millions of cars every year in the freeways, I mean, that's a tremendous amount of addition to whatever we're experiencing. I just wanted to, kind of.
Thank you. Member Madrigal, any additional comments? No.
I'm sorry for interrupting.
Thank you for the presentation. Thank you to our consultants who chimed in and helped
Thank
out.
you.
a lot of information in a very short turnaround, and thanks to Planning Commission and all the other people that have provided comments. So that will conclude this item, which takes us to item E, items for future agendas. Any requests by the committee members for
No, no.
anything in the future? No?
No.
With that, Ms. Mallory, anything else? No?
Excellent presentation. Thank you. Mhm.
Thank you all very
Ashley.
much. That will take us to item F, which is adjournment. It's 7:50 in the evening where our business is done. So we will adjourn this meeting to the next regular meeting. Thank you all.
Thank you. Mhm.